Testing 1, 2, 3. Do you hear me in the back stuff? Okay. It also reminds me when you come up to the microphone that you have to speak right into it. The microphone gets out here. Okay. How we're going to do some ground rules. We're going to be taking questions 3 different ways. Live, that's what this microphone in the center of the room is. We're taking written questions from the audience. We had somebody handing out cards and lending pens.
I think they have them to pass to me.
Right. So the idea was pass them down to the end of the rows and then forward, or just hold your hand up in a way that we'll get somebody to come and get your question. We're also doing a chat on Zoom. We're going to be rotating where the questions come from, something like this, live, written, and chat. We're looking forward to some insightful and probing questions from every source. The microphone in the middle of the room, we'd like you to line up behind it. The one major rule that we have is you cannot shout out questions from the audience. You have to get in line and ask it at the microphone. We'd like you to limit yourself to 1 question each. We want to give as many people as possible a chance to ask questions. If you feel like your questions were not answered, you'll have 1 opportunity for a follow-up clarification. If you want a clarification, label it as so. And try to monitor what questions have been asked prior to yourself so you can ask new questions. We want to avoid duplicate questions. I've been at meetings where people keep asking the same question over and over. If the person in front of you, if you're in line, ask your question, please be gracious enough to just say so and return to your seat. Piece of advice to have a backup question or 2 available in case that happens. I reserve the right to flag any question as a repeat and move on. Written questions, write them down, pass them to the outside row, get them somehow. Please refrain from overt displays of reactions, booing, clapping, hissing, jeering, cheering, etc. This is not a political rally. This is a town hall. Lastly, okay, toward the end of the meeting at 7:20-ish, I'll announce that we're near the end of the meeting. We might run a little bit longer since we're starting a little bit late. In closing, I'd also like to point out that we have some students here from the University of Utah Architecture Department, City and Metropolitan Planning that did a project in Liberty Wells, 20-minute neighborhood. Those posters are on the side wall there. Please take a few minutes after the meeting and look them over. Without further ado, I'd like to introduce our guest, Erin Mendenhall, and also Darin Mano. I understand that you 2 are going to make a short opening statement. Is that correct? And I understand that Darin, you are first.
I didn't understand that, but I can go. Good evening, everybody. I'm Darin Mano. I represent District 5 on the City Council. We're sitting right in the middle of District 5. Thank you for all being here tonight. I'm going to talk about a couple of things. One is the Ballpark Next competition, which we had a great meeting a few weeks ago about that in the Ballpark neighborhood. Thank you, public, for hosting that. The competition received over 200 entries, and an internal city group has been reviewing those and has narrowed it down to a smaller group of those. And then there's a community selection committee. Is anybody here on that committee? Raise your great. The community committee will be meeting tomorrow evening to kick off I'll be part of that, kick off our sort of our portion of it. And so this committee will judge and reduce that down then to a smaller number, and then it's going to be a public public competition. So everyone will have a chance to weigh in on those. I have dates here. Let's see, it will be the 31st of May is an event that will be called the Winners and Themes Celebration event. And that will be where you can come meet some of the winners and have another discussion. One thing we wanted to mention is that this is an ideas competition, so it's meant to generate interest in the ballpark neighborhood. The result of it is not a blueprint for what will be built. It's just ideas that will help inform the city and how that area will develop. But it's an exciting opportunity. We've for many years been working on the Fleet Block, which is about 8 acres, and this is almost double that. And so it's a huge opportunity for us to make a really big splash in this important neighborhood. So that's exciting. As the council, the mayor will be presenting her budget to us in a week and 1 day. And so then we will, as the council, be deliberating the budget. So we'll be going over some of the different priorities and making our final budget in June. That's when our deadline to adopt the final budget is. So it's a good time to get involved. If there are specific departments that you were really interested in, or you just want to learn more about the city process, over the next month and a half, we'll be going over every single aspect of city government and the budgets for those. So it's a good time to sort of tune in to our council meetings. Our council meetings are every Tuesday. And then we will have some Thursday meetings as well, because budget season, there's just not enough Tuesdays. And the last thing I wanted to just mention is a few of the big zoning and sort of housing related initiatives that we're working on as the council. Right now, we are deliberating the downtown building heights and street activation study. And so that's a zoning amendment that will potentially allow additional height in the downtown area and require some more street activation so that you don't have parking lots on the ground floor and things like that. You have actually active public uses. And the other thing that we have been deliberating is the homeless resource center text amendments. That's a change in the process in how homeless resource centers can be approved and where they can be approved. And so those are some of the things that we're working on right now. And we're expecting that we'll be deliberating very soon the moderate income housing plan and the affordable housing incentives overlay, which is geared towards trying to get more affordable housing throughout the city. And so those are some of the things that the council is going to be working on over the next little bit. So if those are of interest to you, please reach out and help us make the right decision. I'll give the mic to the mayor.
Thanks, Darin. Thanks everybody for coming out. Hey, there's seating up front. There's 3 seats on this front row and 3 seats on this front row. And there's 1 seat on the second row on both sides. Aviary, is there one next to you? There's one there. So come on. I know it's a lot of humble city employees who think they have to stand the whole time, but anybody, you should come in and fill in these seats because we've got a lot to talk about. So let's get comfortable. I want to thank, first of all, Tim Brown. Tim runs the aviary here, does a beautiful job. Thank you for hosting us tonight, and to your team for opening the doors. Just a plug, come check out your aviary. It's never been better, and it's always growing and changing. You're doing a great job here, Tim. And give Andy the condor. The Andean condor are best always. Thanks to our city team, Josh Raboyo. Josh? Where are you at? Josh, if you don't know Josh, then you don't come to community councils enough. Josh is the liaison for the mayor's office. And Josh, thank you for always being here on my behalf. But get to know Josh if you don't have his contact info. He's the most direct route to me on a daily basis through the liaison team. And then thanks to all of you city staff who are here. This is the 7th sort of town hall meeting I've done. So I've done it in every district, and ballpark, my home district, is our last one on the setup. So I'm so happy to be here, but there's also a really big turnout for city staff. So thank you all. And I think some of your expertise we're gonna lean into tonight. We've got Mark, our city engineer. We've got John in charge of transportation, Andrew in charge of our homelessness policy, Nick, our planning guy. So many, Jennifer with education, so many people. But one of the big heavy hitters here tonight is Laura Briefer, who runs public utilities. Thank you for being here, Laura. And we're definitely going to talk about flood preparedness and all of that. So I'll give a little bit of an update on that. I wanted to start with crime stats because that's a constant thing and one of the biggest things we are always working on in City Hall. I want to give you the citywide crime data first, and then I'll give you District 5, and this is the most current version of CompStat. Year to date, let me start by saying pandemic 2020 into 2021, Salt Lake City experienced a rising crime like capital cities and medium and large size cities across this country did. We saw an increase in violent crime in particular, including domestic violence, and an increase in property crime as well. And something that's different about this blue dot in a red state since mid-2021 is that we've turned a corner. We've been recovering numbers in our police department. We have more active community-based policing than we've seen in years, meaning officers are out there in the community, they're seeing something and responding to it before they even get deployed at a higher rate than we've seen in years. And we have decreasing crime numbers year to date. So acknowledging that increase in crime and also acknowledging that if crime happens to you or in your neighborhood, in your community, at your business, it is intolerable that no crime is satisfactory to us. So I preface talking to you about the decreasing crime numbers with the acknowledgement that crime impacts us personally. It's incredibly devastating when it does, and that we tolerate zero of that crime in the city. And that's what keeps the creativity going with our federal partners and with this police department to figure out how we can do more. So our citywide crime data year to date, our violent crime is down 8.7%. Total property crime is down almost 17%, 16.7%. And the total part 1 and part 2 crimes is down 15.9% citywide. And in District 5, violent crime is down 31%. Thank you, Chief Brown. Thank you, Police Department. And our total property crimes is actually flat. But what is interesting is that every category of property crime in District 5 is down significantly between 13% and 62% decrease, except for larceny all other, which is up 31%. And this is largely concentrated on Hope Avenue. So those of you in the ballpark community know that's Walmart. So Walmart is dramatically affecting our property crime numbers, and in the grand total between violent crimes and property crimes for District 5 is down just over 3%. I know you've got an awesome detective. Is Sam here tonight?
No, he's not.
Well, he's awesome anyway. And if you don't have Josh's number or Sam's number, those are at least 2 numbers you need to go home with tonight. I wanted to mention, actually, I want to talk to you about homelessness. And I know this is a subject I hope that will come up with more conversation tonight, but just at a high level, let me touch on it by talking about the highly individualized nature of homelessness, which is often talked about as this giant anonymous entity or group of people. It is not a single solution issue. It's as unique as every individual who experiences it. And because of that complexity, we are working like never before to build the partnerships with the county, who has all of the mental and behavioral health dollars locally, and the state, who has amazing financing, but also responsibility in bringing our other city and county partners to the table. It's an issue that we cannot do alone, but for too long, as Salt Lakers, we have been both categorized as the source of homelessness and the only solution to creating solutions to homelessness. And that is a completely false notion. This is not only a national crisis, but it's a statewide crisis. It's a human crisis, and it is a housing crisis. And it's been decades in the making. The good news here is that the partnership is stronger than it's ever been. And you see it now finally starting to bear fruit, not only here in Salt Lake City, but in the state. We see it with more than 400 permanent supportive and transitional housing units, transitional ones for the medically vulnerable population, which were majority funded by the state legislature, and then 6 million from the county and 6 million by the city. We're now seeing the first 94 of those opening at the west end of North Temple, just west of 215. That permanent supportive housing should be open by the end of this month, April. And then we're going to see a medically vulnerable population transitional beds opening. This is a hotel that Shelter the Homeless is acquiring, not in Salt Lake City. And that will be for the medically vulnerable who today are in the shelters at best or on the streets. And that they categorize that as transitional because the hope is to stabilize folks and get them into permanent supportive housing. And then the biggest section of units will be at the Ville 1649, which is the former Ramada on North Temple, which was also the winter overflow shelter last year, not this last winter, but the previous winter. And that has almost 200, just over 200, Andrew, 190-ish units, and they can accommodate couples as well. So that one is more complicated. He's leasing that space, not purchasing it like the others. And so it's coming online a little more slowly, but we'll see it in units of about 50, 40, 40, and 30 coming online in the coming months. You also see it in the mitigation funding that the city received in a permanent way for the first time in the history of hosting our homeless resource centers. You know, South Salt Lake and Midvale, who host the Men's Resource Center and the Family Shelter, since the existence of those shelters, have had millions of dollars permanently promised to them by the state of Utah to mitigate the impacts of the resource centers in those communities, which translates to basically permanent policing that liaisons between the resource centers and those communities. Salt Lake City was guaranteed $0. We had to compete for the remaining funds with every other city who applied in the state until the 22 legislative session, when we were finally guaranteed 2.7 million mitigation, which is on par, given the number of beds we host, with those other cities. And most of all, what I'm most hopeful about right now is that we're finally working with the state and the county and the mental health providers on a solution for the severely mentally ill who are experiencing homelessness on our streets, which are the highest need population and often the highest impact. They need complex and unique help that doesn't exist in the system today. And so this approach we've studied out of Miami-Dade in Florida. It may be the only thing I've ever looked to Florida to try to bring back here. But it's been 22 years in the making there in Miami-Dade County. And it's a solution that actually we've learned with our partners throughout the system. We're not that far from being able to implement, not as far as we thought we may be. It will take legislative change. It will take capital to be implemented. But most of all, it finally serves those individuals who really are not receiving service today, who are cycling through the emergency rooms, the jail, and mostly on our streets without getting services that they need. It also operationally operates at a fraction of the cost of what systemically we're spending on non-solutions right now on these folks. I know I went a little deeper than an introduction, but hopefully we'll be able to talk about any questions you have there. And I know Andrew is leading this conversation for us every hour of the day. So thanks for being here, and you can chime in. And last, I want to just mention our flood risks and flood preparedness. Did anybody come out and help bag sand? Either on flood night up at Immigration on 17th South, or the following Saturday, we had an incredible outpouring of support. In fact, so many people came out to bag sand that we thought it would take 2 days, and we filled every bag in just one day. At Immigration Creek, there at Wasatch Hollow Park, if you've ever gone down and looked in the glen there, you'll see the structure, the cement box with the grate on the front. That's actually owned and operated by Salt Lake County, where the city and the county do flood mitigation and impact management together. And there was a plate of metal inside of that facility that became loose and tipped up. That was the blockage that happened during some of the peak runoff after that 82-degree day. And it took a little while. Last Saturday, our crews pumped the water out of that dell, which had become almost more than 25 feet deep, so that our fire department heavy rescue crew could get in there and remove that blockage secure it again. We've left the diversion in place in case some debris comes down that could create another sudden blockage at the peak runoff times. Just in case. It's an in-case position there right now. But the crews did an amazing job. Salt Lake City crews did a great job. And I'll just wrap up by saying, and then if there's more flood questions, we can also call Laura up, that we really haven't seen the peak of runoff for most of the creeks. It's unique that immigration, well, Laura probably and the hydrologists know why, but immigration coming off so early, while City Creek, which you might think being a sort of basically a north-south facing canyon, isn't really yet to touch its peak runoffs yet, as well as Parley's and some of the others. South of 21st South, all that water coming into the Jordan River, we have some opportunity at 21st South to divert it into the surplus canal, which, as Laura and I walked there about a week ago, had a lot of capacity yet to go. Plenty of capacity in there, we hope. It looks very good. North of 21st South, as our city creeks all flow down toward the Jordan, that's where we're using our upstream capacity, no thanks to the drought conditions. There's been a lot of capacity in Little Dell and the other reservoirs, which there wasn't in 1983. They were all quite full or didn't exist. Little Dell didn't exist then. And as you know, the Great Salt Lake needs so much water, and that capacity is there as well. So managing both the upstream volumes and having the capacity to put it downstream is a very good thing. The threat to us is what kind of debris comes down in those high runoff situations. So the city and county crews are monitoring both technologically. You can go onto the county's flood website and see the real-time monitors at those sort of pinch points where the rates are. And there's crews with tractors at the points where they can be consistently clearing out debris that comes down. So that's where the management is at for flood. Bill, do you want me to hand it over to questions at this point?
Yep.
And I'm gonna get drinks.
Turn the button on the top of it.
Okay, folks, you get to look at my face and see my voice more than I thought. We are going to try to repeat questions up here and then get answers from the speakers up here so you can hear them. Hope that is okay with everybody. We are building the plane while we're flying.
This is the chat.
I don't know what the 45 more is. I guess that is the chat. I also looking at the chat.
Are there any questions in person? Should we jump to one in the chat?
Okay, so what can I bring this to? So you said we had to be close to this. Do we need to?
Got it. We're good.
Okay. All right, thank you. So what we're going to have everyone do is we're going to go live to have a question person. That's great. Stay in your seat. A lot of you have passed your cards already to the front. And if you have more cards, you can just pass it to the side. And we're going to come up. Because of the technical difficulties at the front, the mayor and Councilman Mano are going to go ahead and repeat every question so that people understand here. So that will be a little fun. So yeah, who wants to do this?
Hi, my name is Wendy Garden, and I'm an advocate for homeless services. I feel like today might be a really good day to change the conversation about homeless services. There has been a lot of contention between the residents of the neighborhoods that are most affected by homelessness and the businesses that are constantly affected by homelessness and have insurance claims and are threatened or canceled by their insurance. And then there's homeless services advocates who are out here trying to advocate for the civil rights of the people involved. And there's been a lot of talk that makes that seem to be contentious. But I believe that we all have the same goals. And so that's where I wanted to start.
I'm familiar. We're asking for questions in the crowd, so we're not giving a time limit. So if you can get to your question and ask a question.
So in 2020, we needed 150 overflow beds. In 2021, we needed 250. In 2022, we needed 450, and this coming winter, we're going to need 600. So the number of people living on the streets is increasing rapidly. I definitely understand that the city has been investing money in housing. We all agree that housing is the end goal. But I also think we really could be having some honest conversations about these statistics, how it is affecting residents and business owners and the homeless, and how we can address some of those temporary needs as housing is slow to come on. Thank you.
Okay, so Bill, at the beginning of the meeting, he was very clear that we need to make sure that we keep our comments too short and then get to a question if you'd like to. So we'll just let the mayor speak.
Thanks, Wendy. And I appreciate you working to bring a consensus to the opportunity and the need in this moment. And I also agree that we have more in common in our desired outcomes than has been the subject of most of the conversation lately. And I also agree that the escalation in the number of individuals experiencing homelessness nationwide has seen a tragic, dramatic increase over the course of the pandemic, the economic impacts on families, but also the shifting economy that we've seen for years in rural Utah communities that are transitioning, some from coal to either other industries or searching for new industries. And most of all, the decades-long lack of any federal system for those with mental health needs. When the hospitals were closed for good reason in the Reagan administration, nothing was put back in a significant or systemic way in the local level. So cities have been grappling alone without actually mental or behavioral health resources for decades. And then you couple that with the recent impacts economically from the pandemic, changing rural economies, and the fact that, and you've heard me say it before, mayors and council people from across the state of Utah, I've been in City Hall this is my 10th year. For 10 years, they've been looking me in the eye and saying, if we see someone experiencing homelessness in our city, we put them in the back of the cop car and drop them off in Salt Lake. And they mean it, I think, from a compassionate place because there's nothing in their communities, but there's also been decisions and policy decisions of not allowing affordable housing to happen, not investing in affordable housing, and in many cases, not even allowing services to exist in communities. What is the cumulative impact of that when you bring an economic crisis along with a pandemic into the nation? There's more people losing their housing. There's more people that are dealing with behavioral health, substance use needs, and there's not enough support. So about 3 cities in the state, Ogden, Salt Lake, and St. George primarily, end up shouldering the state's homelessness crisis. So those numbers are dramatic. They're dramatic across the country, and they're representative of a system-wide failure at a federal level, and now the state stepping in to a role that I think they should have been in a long time. But I'm grateful that Wayne Niederhauser is in there now and bringing some unanimous or not unanimous, unanimity, is that the word? Some cohesion to the needs and some frankness about what those needs are. So I know that was a long answer and maybe you didn't have a direct question, but the last part I want to say, and I know there's more conversation, but is that finally the state, if you rewind to 2020, Mayor Mendenhall was the only one saying we need another shelter. And in the papers, people were saying, service providers were saying, we don't need another shelter. The state is now saying, we need a shelter. We need it fast. And we need a bigger winter shelter plan that serves everybody, not across 5 locations where they end up being bussed back downtown every morning because there's no daytime services. The state, who should be leading this conversation, and we are with them. We want to make this happen as fast as it can. So I am incredibly hopeful because we're finally, like you said, realizing how much we agree upon and how close we are to having system-wide solutions. I'm never going to say to you, we're going to solve homelessness. That we realize that that's not the real outcome, but the opportunity of everyone who wants a bed, having a bed, we have to get there. We have to get there right now.
That would be great, but I think that my question was, I didn't hear you ask the question, so okay, sorry for that.
And I didn't read through that.
My question is understanding the complexity, understanding the multiple levels of responsibility, things that people in this room right now have control over. What can we do together to address that? Is there a plan to shelter in place near enough resources? I heard all of the things you said. I've been listening very hard. I think that a lot of these plans are going to be very effective in the long term. What are the short-term solutions that we can place to address the immediate needs for current people?
Yeah, do I need to repeat that for Zoom?
I'm writing it down.
Okay. Immediate needs, I would say two things off the top of my head. First is recognition and helping the community understand that when we talk about homelessness, it's not, there is no one solution. One solution doesn't work. And in fact, the system serves about 70% of the people who come in contact with the system really well. And they resolve their experience of homelessness within about 6 months. And they don't come back to the homeless resource centers. It works well for most people who come into the system, but it's insufficient. And the 30% or so, and that's a changing, number over time, but that minority of the population are typically more complex in their needs, and therefore the solutions we have to present have to be as unique as those complex needs are. So this looks like a much more low barrier shelter that Wayne Niederhauser received $1 million through this last legislative session to start up. He needs land. I don't know if any of you own 10 acres or so of land, but talk to Wayne Niederhauser if you do. He's looking. And that we need ongoing support from the legislature for the operations of the resource center system as a whole. All of the system needs more money to function. And the last part, as voters and as people communicating with your legislators, which Salt Lakers are so good at, we need ongoing funding from the state for, because the city's going to keep doing it. We need permanent supportive housing and deeply affordable housing consistently invested in. Salt Lake City's investment in affordable housing has increased more than 400% since 2020. There's no political divide here about whether or not we're going to invest in affordable housing. None. What we need is a consistent investment from the state, which we've seen for the last 2 legislative sessions, exponentially more than they've ever done before, ever. So we're 2 years in, 2 plots make a line, but we need a trend with them. So Wendy, I know it's a broad question you asked and sort of a broad answer, understanding the complexity, advocating, the city hears you. We are investing there, but advocating for this partnership to keep showing up. And then the ongoing support for services and housing, because this drop in the bucket is just beginning. It's just the beginning.
Great question.
Just jump in. Okay.
My question is, I don't think that homelessness people want to do anything but stay homeless. They do not want anybody to help, and that's how I feel.
Will you tell us your name? If you're, and anybody who comes up, if you're willing to tell us your name or your community council.
No.
Not a question, but I hear your statement. And I would say that if that were true, then it wouldn't be true that the majority of people who come into the system resolve their homelessness and are housed. Well, the majority of people do become housed, but there is a big impact from the few who don't.
Out the street than anywhere else. They do not want to work. They're just the way they are.
I want to jump in here and agree with the mayor that there is a whole spectrum of the human condition, including a whole spectrum of people experiencing homelessness. And I don't think it's fair for us to lump everybody into one condition and blame their condition on themselves. Kelly?
Thank you for being here. I'll be quite pretty on that. So tell me.
You sound good.
Okay. As a business owner, who supports the unsheltered on Third West? Because I'm on Third West, I'm in the center. So it's kind of weird. Yeah, I have. What I love in the city is something that helps these small businesses who have not been able to
Not been able to file.
Some kind of broken window. Today, this year, I'm supposed to pay around.
I don't know if it's you or us.
I mean, like us. Is there anything to support somebody other than mega developers?
I mean, like that. Mega developers don't get money for broken windows, just so you know.
Oh, I know.
And your the broken window fund concept is, I kind of want Chief to talk about. There's a new approach that we're taking, which we're not quite to the public unveiling yet, but it's begun this week. And let me just bring it in to say that the best approach is one that taps all of the resources of the city. I'm talking about all the budgets of the city too. Economic development, who right now you're on Third West. We should talk about road work. There, we created the construction impact fund for businesses. Thank you, which didn't exist before 2020. And similarly, we think about the impacts relative to proximity to resource centers and some other services in the community. And there's a new approach. Chief, I don't mean to put you on the spot. I don't know how much we're ready to daylight on this, but I'll say in an umbrella way that we are bringing all of the departments of the city that work in the public realm, and there are a dozen, to bring their resources to bear on these highly impacted areas to try to use all of our different resources. I'm talking from streetlights to curb and gutter to police officers to trees that are planted or bushes that are allowing things to happen, all to bear on this issue. Because I think just a single fund in one department isn't quite good enough.
Thank you, Mayor.
Chief,
Chief,
can you come up here so the Zoom people can hear you? And Amy doesn't have to retype everything you're saying.
I type so fast, Darin.
She's a great typer, but
That's what this PhD got me. Yes.
Thank you, Councilman. You know, in policing, we have a lot of acronyms. We got a really cool acronym for it. It's called Problem-Oriented Police-Based Areas. What we're going to do is we're looking for areas that really are, they're bigger than what we can police. And the mayor's right. If we bring all the different disciplines within the city to bear on some of these problems, we can really make an impact. A lot of it has to do with homeless issues. Well, we're never going to arrest our way out of homelessness. A lot of it has to do with addiction issues. A lot of them are lighting, septic, different areas that we want to work on. So we're going to start a program in the next month or two, identifying some of these areas, and then bringing collectively all the disciplines and all the departments of the city to bear on those.
Do you want to mention when we're presenting to the council?
We're going to talk about it and unveil it next Tuesday at council. We're really excited about it, and then we'll do a press conference after that. But we now have brought together all the department heads and trained to it. This is being directed from the University of Texas, San Antonio, who's helping us with a lot of our data analysis and this direction. But it's going to be a fantastic program, and I think it'll bring a lot of relief to the neighborhood, and it'll move the needle in a lot of things we all expect.
Thanks, Chief. Hey, Jason.
Mayor, hey, Councilman.
I think it was me.
I'll step back a bit.
I had a question. It's not about a specific issue, but it's a couple of approach issues. People who show up at an event like tonight are usually people who follow what's going on in our city. They're also viewed as people who are influential in their neighborhood. People come to them to find out about what's going on and what they should do. And there's a lot of issues that are coming up in Salt Lake City. And a lot of things that have been done. For instance, a lot of people like slower speeds, but maybe not on their commute to work. A lot of people like affordable housing and multifamily housing, but maybe not on their block. And a lot of people like ADUs, maybe not a lot of people, but some people like ADUs, but maybe not in their backyard. And I'm wondering what advice you would give to the people in this room who maybe support those issues and are going to be talking about them in their community to kind of get beyond the postage stamp of my yard or my experience. What is best for the city and best for our community? Just advice for those that, as these issues are approaching, that we can use as we talk about them here.
Thanks, Jason.
Thanks, Jason. So the question, I think Amy's retyping, but the question was, what's the advice for people to get involved in some of the issues that they care about, so that we're not just speaking to the same influential, quote unquote, influential people. I don't know if I slaughtered your question or not, but I really love the question. I think it's really important and fundamental to what we do. We're the level of government that's closest to the individuals that we serve. And ideally, we're the level of government that is reaching out to the broadest spectrum of people, not just those that are influential, not just those that have businesses or large businesses or anything like that. So that's something that's incredibly important to me, and a question that is difficult to answer, but I think the best thing is to figure out what you're passionate about, what you as an individual are interested in, and figure out a way to insert yourself into the conversation. I more than any other time, I think in the history, we have a government that is wanting to reach out to the historically marginalized communities in our city. We have the most diverse city council that we've ever had in our city, and it's my goal, and I think our entire city's goal, to make sure that all of the voices are heard, not just those that are traditionally empowered by government, traditionally listened to. So it's kind of being squeaky, raising your hand and asking for the things that are important to you, I think is important, and making sure that you're taking up that space.
I'm going to take a different tack on this question. I think it was this kind of sometimes disconnect between supporting growth issues or approaches in the city, but not where you live. And how should the community maybe think about what we have before us now and what's coming in the pipeline. And I think, I've known a lot of you for over a decade in these community council meetings. And I think that it may be true that the majority of you came to community council because there was some issue that was rooted in growth that drove you to care enough to show up. Maybe that's a growing population of people experiencing homeless. Maybe it's a growing incident of single family homes being rezoned to multifamily homes, or traffic in your area. You know what your reasons are, but I bet they're related to growth. And there are some things we can control at the city level. There's a lot of things we can't, like the fact that from 2010 to 2020, Utah had the fastest growing population in the nation, and we're still leading the country with the fastest growing rate, over 18% growth. It's phenomenal. We can't control I don't want to control how attractive this place is to live in, because you and I get to live the benefits of that quality of life, but other people are noticing. And that's been a long time coming. So how we grow is the crux of the conversation. And I look at Sugar House, a retired RDA project area. Hi, Judy. Thanks for all your help there still. But that was a community conversation to say, we're growing. How do you want to grow? And it initially looked at making medium density much farther out from the downtown core of Sugar House. We could go medium and broader, or we could go a lot taller and more narrow. And that was a conversation we had more than a quarter century ago. Now we're going to have that conversation at Ballpark on 13.5 acres. We're having it at Fleet Block on over 7.5 acres. And we're having it here in District 5 in other parts, and 9th and 9th also. So I guess what I ask you is, you know, we're not going to control the growth that is happening here. We can control where it grows, how tall it grows, what kind of growth we incentivize. Like the fact now that nobody can get RDA money for a new building unless it's 100% electric. It has to be a net zero building. I think that's damn cool. You can't have our money to build polluting buildings anymore. So that's the kind of decisions that we get to make, but the forces affecting our growth are somewhat out of our control. How do you want your neighborhood to look, given the fact that it's going to change? And try to come to it. I come to it with my kids and my, you know, my oldest child who's ambitious and my other kids, brilliant ideas. Can't wait to see what they do with the world, but they look at me and say, I don't think I'll live here because I'm pretty sure I won't be able to afford a house and afford a place to live. And that motivates me, I'll tell you what. Yeah, I'm gonna take that.
Hey there, I'm gonna ask some of the questions that I'm rolling in online, right? Here's a little bit of a topic change. Is there any enforcement plan? This is coming from Lauren Waters online. Is there any enforcement plan for the residential streets that have changed to a 20-mile-an-hour speed limit?
You want to do it?
Yeah. Thank you for the question. That was one of the exciting things that we did recently was reduce the residential speed limit from 25 to 20 miles per hour. But the answer is no, we're not wanting to use that as an enforcement tool. We're not asking the police department to go out and actively enforce against those. It's more of, in my mind, it's more of a public education. And really the data does show that reducing the speed limit will reduce the traffic speed, but it's more about, I think the bigger thing that we need to do, which we're desperately trying to do, is redesign our streets so that they support safer bicycle and pedestrian passage and that they encourage cars to drive more slowly. That's unfortunately a very expensive thing to do, redesigning and redoing a street, but we have John Larson here who is doing a great job at doing that as quickly as possible. So but for me, I don't want to go to a strictly enforcement-based system because that doesn't tend to work. And then it can also, a speeding ticket can disproportionately affect somebody that's already tight on their budget and doesn't really affect others.
But you totally can get a ticket for speeding.
Well,
okay. Don't misinterpret that. I saw Chief Brown like, no. Yeah, no, we did a lot of enforcement the first 6 months on the change. We're past 6 months now. You can get a ticket, but we're not increasing enforcement, I wouldn't say. Jordan.
Hi, I'm Jordan. I'm from the ballpark neighborhood. And a couple, now about 6 weeks ago, we had a really great conversation and the ballpark community attended. And one of the questions and curiosities myself and citizens had then was, what are 2 or 3 ideas or concepts that are starting to bubble up that, whether it's now the submissions of Ballpark Next or just the ruminations of businesses and developers and amazing ideas that the city is, or your administration is excited about and or really consider that you want to put on our radar. Back then, it was hard to get a clear answer because things were pretty new. Fast forward 6 weeks, there's new announcements of the baseball stadium, Utah's getting to a stadium. These are moving forward to daybreak. Curious if you could list 3 concepts that are exciting and starting to take some real consideration.
No concepts are taking real consideration. 100%, Jordan. We are way premature for that. You haven't even seen the concepts yet. And what you and your neighbors and the community group that's about to vet them say, and then the full public vetting that we're going to go through, that's going to be the biggest influence on what happens. So I'm reluctant to even say some ideas because it's not time to come at this with my picks.
I wonder if Councilmember
I say ideas.
Please, because anything that's putting a hop in his step.
Since Laura Griefer's here and we're watching the creeks, there have been some daylighting notions which are really fun, tied into recreation and open space creation There have been some beautiful adaptive reuses of the ballpark itself, some for sports. I see we've got a women's sports advocate here, and that's a really cool big concept. And some for like makers, bars, restaurants, activation year round. All in all, the same thing I said to you 6 weeks ago. I want year-round activation there. Positive, awesome anchor for the community, for the city. So that is going to mean a lot of things. It cannot mean, it should not mean one use in the area. But it's too soon for me to have a ranking opinion.
Yeah, I will answer Jordan's question not by saying what the 3 things I want to be built there or be brought there, but the 3 maybe results that I want. I want a ballpark neighborhood that continues to be an attractor for the region. The B Stadium, when it's still here, but the B Stadium has been something that people come from all over the valley to go to. I want something like that still. Not sure exactly what that might be, but I want some reason for people from the outside of the neighborhood to still come to ballpark neighborhood. But I also want things that people in the neighborhood that maybe aren't baseball fans or aren't coming for that one specific use to be able to enjoy. So restaurants, bars, shops. I want more commercial activity there. That's a goal for me. And then I just want a place that is walkable, that you can bike through, that you can feel safe as you're going through, and that people can enjoy without having to rely only on a car. But that's not a specific use. Those are like goals for how to experience the neighborhood.
We're going to take one more from the audience here, and then you can move to the car.
Thanks, Erin. I'm a former player, current coach, and board member for Utah Falcons football and the Texas Pride organization. And follow up woman's question about ballpark. We know that it's in the very early stages of the social work now. You know, as you said, looked at or discussed, but with our team, with our organization, we know that the idea of a women's sports facility has been proposed. Obviously, that's very exciting to us as a team, as an organization, but also the women's athletic community as a whole. So, and this is more of an open question, but what can we do as an organization, and not just a football team, like I said, our women's sex supply and profit group, what can we do to share what kind of impact the states would have on the women's sports community, and what could we do to kind of share that? What can we do to kind of garner support for this idea within the community, within the neighborhood, and obviously it will impact us, but we want to know what kind of impact it will have on the neighborhood, and what could we do as an organization to promote this as a proposed idea for that location.
Yeah, I think you're doing it. I think we've had more coverage than the other ideas. And we're not asking anybody to start promoting anything yet, because the community is just about to start to see these concepts. I don't actually even know if your proposal is one of the top 10 from the professional category that's been selected, that the community group is about to see tomorrow night. So that'll be a big unveiling. And then I think you heard me say that my biggest priority is year-round activation. Bringing in more sports teams doesn't necessarily do that for us unless you're activating it with a lot of other strong anchors that can survive when you're not playing. So I think showing that balance of continuous activation, given that it's a sports use again, would be good.
We did have some cards, but several of them were redundant with questions that were already asked. However, we were asked to prepare neighborhood specific questions, so I'm hoping that's okay if we move on to those. I know Doug Flagler has one in the back of the room, if that's okay.
the other councils go first.
Hit it, Doug. Oh.
Hi, Mayor. Hi, Councilman. Thank you so much for having this council tonight. It's wonderful to be here. My name is Alicia Cunningham-Bryant. I'm a new board member for Elka. So I'm really excited to ask you this question. I'm new. So we and our constituents appreciate so much your focus on data-driven policymaking, and you brought that up a lot this evening in the sort of focus you have. It's fundamental to build community-centered and supportive policies. But a crucial aspect of data analysis is the functional review of our data, not just summary data, and that can lead to potential bias that's baked into the summary. Can you tell us what steps you are taking to make this hard data available to community council so we can be reactive and supportive to our community members?
Yeah, I can take that. Yeah, great question. And I don't know that from a data perspective, I can give you a substantial enough data answer. But Nick Krieger, who runs GIS for Salt Lake City, is tasked with, actually about 2 years ago, coalescing the plethora of data that the city collects every single day, from SLT mobile app, graffiti reports, branch down to public utility notices that someone's going to have their water turned off, to business licenses that are spiking in a certain area or falling off in a certain area. There's so much data, and that we never, prior to about 18 months ago, had brought it together into a single system where we can look through many layers and focus in even at a block by block neighborhood level. You're going to be seeing this very soon. And it's an incredible dashboard also that layers investment. The CIP program, the capital improvement program, which as community councils, you apply for money for every year. We've even gone back and mapped about 10 years worth of CIP investments. So you can see the equity or inequity across time of where the city's been investing. And our CDCIP board, is anybody here on CDCIP? Serious. Back there, you just answered. Anyway, that our CDCIP board, which is the Community Development Capital Improvement volunteer committee that reviews all those applications and all the city's applications, is now using that data to help inform their vetting process. And as they decide what to recommend to me, and then I ultimately recommend it to the council. So you primed up a really great question. And I hope you'll be really excited about the data unveiling we're working towards in the next couple of months.
Thank you so much.
Yeah, thanks.
Uh-oh.
Hi, Carl.
Okay. All right.
Is that loud?
Council member Mano and Mayor Mendenhall. So my question, this is for y'all. I'm an indigenous activist, and I find myself specializing in hypocrisies, the hypocrisy of America, the hypocrisy of a lot of things. And I'm going to ask you a question. So when it comes to, the care of people and the marginalization, and I've said this and I criticize the council because they're all marginalized, but yet there's those people in the unsheltered community. There are veterans in the unsheltered community. There are people that are suffering from so many things, and they are at the very highest risk of death and to be exploited by the people. So my biggest question is why do we have Chief Brown and his SLCPD, the county health department, Advantage Services, supported by Salt Lake City, actually stealing people's survival gear so that they cannot get ahead in life? And maybe this is more of an education for people here, but they actually get their items stolen. Police officers who are supposed to be the ones who keep people safe and keep them from property theft, for domestic violence, all those things, actually are doing the opposite and stealing. And I think it's great that everyone's sandbagging and things, but sandbagging is saving property. It's not saving damn lives, okay? Just so y'all know.
it's lives that are important.
Thanks, Carl.
Can we actually get an answer to the question?
Yeah. Yes.
Yeah.
I knew she would answer.
I'm ready. I'm good. Carl, I don't know if we're going to agree on this, but I'm going to tell you my answer. Salt Lake City Police Department assists at the requests of the Salt Lake County Public Health Department that they attend and assist in these cleanups, not because of the threats of the individuals who are experiencing homelessness to the county workers, but because of activists and people who have tried to insert themselves between the cleanup and the county health workers. And those health workers have been assaulted, threatened, and accosted to the point that they, whether they're in Salt Lake City or South Salt Lake or Midvale doing a cleanup, they request that the police department of that city assist them. And in addition, when you talk about people's belongings, it's been an effort since 2020 when we said we can't expect everyone who needs a service to come into the 4th Street Clinic or the DMV to get their driver's license and the health department to get a COVID test or a vaccine. So we started a community commitment program that tries to come out, cannot come out to every encampment cleanup, but tries to come out well in advance of a camp closure to offer services from what started with more than a dozen agencies, not mostly the city, it's mostly service providers saying you need a driver's license. The justice courts come out and they resolve warrants on site with people. And you know, we do kayak court as well, helping people get COVID tests or vaccines during the heights of the pandemic. Housing locators, some of which are in this room, who go out and try to connect people with housing. That's the best case scenario for the larger encampments. But since we built a rapid intervention team that engages with camps before they get very large, before the county health department comes in, we're working on a 48-hour cycle of notification. And I know that Andrew probably wants to chime in on the posting element of that, hanging signs, not happening, signs being taken down. Also, that people go to work who are living in encampments, people are getting food, they're moving about, they're using a restroom somewhere, they're out. And so whether or not they are there when the notification comes because of a worker from the health department or Allison Dupler's team, when Hart comes through and says, hey, an abatement's going to happen on this date, they may not be there, and that communication is difficult, and we understand that. But it is absolutely the ambition. I can't speak for the county, but I know it is of the cleanups that people know in advance that it's going to happen. And I also can't blame people for not picking up at that second and saying, well, in 2 days, the abatement's going to come, so I might as well move now. I can't blame people for not moving immediately. I can't blame people for staying where they're already set up. But when the abatement comes, of which there's notification, if people have left their things behind, they get cleaned up. And that's a difficult and honestly an ugly process. I want to also mention that the tractors that are used are not there. That's an ugly scene. And the tractors are used because the health department workers and the heart team workers have been stuck by needles so many times with gloved hands that it was no longer safe to send cleanup workers in hand by hand cleaning it up. Tractors are used to avoid that human health threat to the workers. So it is ugly and it is complex when you have to bring tractors in to clean up belongings, but it's never the intention to steal people's belongings, tents and sleeping bags. Carl, we could go on all night, you know this.
But my question was, it's not why are the police officers there? Is how can you have police officers there when this is happening? It is inhumane to leave a dog outside and to not give it food or water. But yet we do abatements and people die outside. I was just coming here, 2 police officers were right up the road telling people that they couldn't camp there. And then it's going to rain and they're making sure that they don't have any kind of shelter. And this is the experience right now. Yes.
Thank you, Carl.
you want to take now to discuss?
Yeah, I'm sorry, I should have handed
No.
you if you wanted to.
It's grants.
It is Grant. Hi, my name is Grant Miller. Quick question about flooding. A lot of District 5 is within some kind of floodplain. Even where we stand right now is at risk of potential flooding on Liberty, down to about State Street. My question to the city officials are: how high risk are we in the District 5 neighborhoods of catastrophic flooding, and should we be preparing now with sandbags, or are we going to be okay?
So I just want to say, this is Laura Reefer, who's the director of our public utilities department. I think you can hear us all gushing about her from time to time in our meetings, but I have never thought that water and sewer infrastructure was as sexy as it was until I became a council member and learned from Laura. So she has a wealth of knowledge.
And I'm recruiting if anyone wants to come work for my department too. So before I answer the question, I also want to acknowledge we have our emergency manager here, Chief Bowden, who has been really instrumental in the lead up to this year's spring runoff. We've worked very collaboratively with him in the fire department and Chief Brown with the police department and many other city departments. And so Chief Bowden, thank you so much for your support. So the question about risk and flooding. First of all, I want to step back and just say the District 5 area is where it's located. Actually, 3 of the streams that come down from the mountains, Immigration, Red Butte, and Parley's Creek, all converge here in District 5. Immigration and Red Butte converge pretty close to where we're standing now on 700 East. And then Parley's Creek converges on 1300 South at State Street. So that's oftentimes a great benefit to have all that water. So you see some of it in Liberty Park Pond at times. So right now, based on all of the information that we've been gathering, we look at information from the Colorado Basin River Forecast Center, which is a division of the National Oceanic Atmospheric Administration. We're looking at actual snowpack inspections. We have a hydrologist that is getting up into these upper watersheds to look at snowpack and just doing a lot of assessment, real-time assessment. Right now, I would not say that District 5 is at risk for catastrophic flooding or anywhere in the city. What we are looking for is the potential for localized flooding. And the reason why I say we're not at risk for catastrophic flooding is because the drainage system and the water management system that we have today is a lot different than in 1983. A lot of improvements have been made. There are a lot of operational improvements that we have access to that we didn't have then. The mayor mentioned Little Dell Reservoir, which we can manage Parley's Creek flows upstream from us, as well as other improvements within the drainage system. But we are looking at areas that we talk about in my department as pinch points on the system. And what that means is you've got water coming down the open stream channel and it has to dive under a road and re-enter the stream channel, or it goes from the stream channel to a piped system. Those areas just naturally constrain the flow of water. So they have a certain capacity in them. What we're seeing right now for Immigration Creek that comes through District 5 is that it appears to have already peaked. And it peaked the week that Wasatch Hollow flooded. So the forecast does not appear we're going to see elevated stream flow anymore in Immigration Creek. Red Butte Creek also, the forecasted stream flows are much less than what we might see in a big monsoonal storm in the summer. So we've calculated that the system has capacity for that as well, based on the most current forecasts. Parley's Creek is the one that we're most worried about. And if anyone has tried to get into Sugar House Park via car recently, you'll know that we've closed Sugar House Park for vehicle traffic. And that's because we're managing Parley's Creek, both in the Mountain Dell, Little Dell Reservoir system to hold water up high, But also we're using the capacity of Sugar House Park, which was actually constructed as a detention basin to prevent flooding. We also have stream teams that these are our city employees that have 24-hour, well, they don't each have 24-hour shifts. But we have teams of people that are looking at each of the streams and the culverts and doing cleanup where needed. We have shifts that are working overnight during this runoff season. So we're taking it seriously because of the snowpack, but we're doing a lot right now to mitigate the risk of flooding.
Thanks.
Thank you.
Any more? A couple more questions from out here because it's hard to late.
This is a question that's kind of a combination of small comments, so we have some others that been crafted from the chat. But one is since the start of the pandemic, the highest crime months in ballpark neighborhood have been July 2022 with 521 crimes, followed by January 2023, 512 crimes. These are all property-driven crimes. What is the city looking at to try and stem the property crime in the ballpark neighborhood?
Yeah, thanks, Doug. And I talked about this at the top of the meeting. Chief, I don't know if you want to add any other detail, but the presence of the Walmart on Hope Avenue is the most significant impact, single source impact on larceny in District 5. And it is determining the total crime count for property crime for the entire district's preponderance of larceny or robberies basically at Walmart. And that pisses me off.
Significantly down. It's the larcenies, the thefts, and what we're talking about is shoplifts. These are shoplifts that are occurring on Hope Avenue, Walmart. We don't have a lot of control over that. That happens within the store. They call us to respond. We work with their safety and security team to see what we can do to maybe mitigate that. But really, that is kind of their purview, and it's more of a responsive thing. What I maybe should do is we should pull those numbers out so you can see those, because I would dare bet you pull those out, we're doing very well in larcenies as well.
And I want to give you some numbers. So total count of property crimes in District 5 in 2022, year to date, was 708. Total count in 2023, same period of time, is 712. So a difference of 4. Of those 712, 513 of those were larceny. Every other category was down between 13% and 62% down. Like it is by and large just the bulk of the entire property crimes category. And those who knew me as council person here, this disproportionate impact of this one business who, based on their operational decisions not to pursue criminals not to prevent shoplifting enough, so that they end up using the resources of the police department to do arrests on site instead of paying for enough security. That is a disproportionate impact that should be reflected in their business license. There's protections in place at state levels from allowing us to necessarily implement that, but this has been a long time going on, and it's an operational choice that Walmart makes. Kelly, you want to stand up? You have any okay, thanks. You got to use the mic.
If you would like to talk about this portion of 2022 impacts, I don't have an original catalytic converter on my fleet. We were broken into 11 times in 22.
teams.
This is one business. In 23 to date, well, Michelle and I have shared the non-compliant sexual offender was finally set steadily. Most of the business owners have shared experiences with the window breaker. And the thing is, I don't have a problem with administrators. They generally take really good care of people when you're having a little bit of a mental hiccup. My issue is I'm not trusting these stats because I know what my impact's been. I know how much I personally have lost. And it doesn't come out of my staff's paycheck. It comes out of mine. So that means that when somebody's tweaking on something that's mixed with bath salts, I don't get a paycheck that month. I don't see anybody else here not getting a paycheck because I've had 5 burglaries in the same month. That's the disproportion.
It is, Kelly, you're right. And I want to say a couple of things. You know this though, report, because if those numbers aren't here, we didn't get a call. So we need you to, I know you know this, but I'm saying this for the group here. Report. The data-driven strategy is as good as the data we get. So talking to us, I know that you're staff and you do report. The disproportionate impact of the homeless resource centers also has a lot to do with the untreated mental illness and the substance use issues that are on the streets. I know that this doesn't bring immediate comfort, but the Huntsman Mental Health Receiving Center that they are building next to the jail and the Men's Resource Center in South Salt Lake is going to be 2 more years till it's open. It will be the first mental health receiving center of its sort in the entire county. It's a 72-hour max holding facility. It's not housing, but it is a place where people who right now are either going into the ER and coming right back where they were within a couple of hours typically, or going to the jail and not getting in because jail isn't the treatment for behavioral health, and CJAC knows that. The mental health receiving center will be a benefit. And in the meantime, our city council worked with the county council and pressured them to fund a bridge facility. It serves 16 individuals right now, and it's just getting up with Huntsman. This is sort of outside the city, but thanks to the city council that there's a bridge facility until 2 years. The last part, and I think the biggest part, sadly, in terms of a neighborhood impact, is what those mitigation dollars that I said we got 0 because of the relationship between this city and the capital. When we got our homeless resource centers, they gave the other 2 cities money. They didn't give us anything in a guaranteed way. Chief got that money as of July 1. So 9 months ago. And at July 1, when the state released that funding, he could start building a team. And these are the police officers who will basically be in the neighborhood around homeless resource centers. Can you give us an update on that team?
Yeah, Kelly and everyone here. Have you guys met the Detective or Sergeant Nate Miser? What's that?
You know, I love Nate.
Okay, he is one of the sergeants that's going to be heading up one of these teams. We don't have the officers because they're in the academy right now. They'll be out here shortly. But in the short term, Nate has overtime money and has a team that's signed up to help him. So we know that you need help and you need it right now. The other thing is, have you talked to Andrew Soliloglou, Detective? Blue?
Yes.
Anybody?
Yes.
All right. Good. If you have his number, but if you need help today, get with me after this meeting. I'll give you numbers and resources. We will be there tomorrow to help you. I mean, we have short, medium, and long-term strategies, but I want you to know we have people dedicated right now, dedicated teams and overtime to help you with those issues.
In 5 and we have wonderful teammates, fabulous, amazing.
Yeah.
I just have sense of humor in 5 items. That's legit. But and I'm not asking for more punishment.
No,
No, we agree.
Yes.
Yes.
Like me. For people like Michelle who just lost a client today, and she can't afford to lose any more clients because she's going to live with her house. So people like to see this barber shop, this is a lot of insurance.
Kelly, everybody online can't hear you if you're not in the mic, but I'm just gonna reiterate that Kelly's talking about local businesses who are losing clients, losing employees, and having impacts to their fleets and their buildings and their properties because of unmanaged capacity or insufficient capacity for behavioral health, drug use, mental illness, and sometimes the combinations there that end up playing out not in the homeless resource centers, but out in the neighborhoods. And we agree with you. We agree with you. And that we don't believe that jailing is the solution here, but we have to have a presence in the neighborhood at the same time. And we see it with violent crime disruption that they've done as well, that violent crime, police presence doesn't just move violent crime somewhere else. They don't say, Chief, actually, I was going to stab you here, but let's go around the corner because there's a cop car. You actually eliminate it. So we know the presence matters, but we also know that the mental health and behavioral health part has to be coming from our partners at the state and the county. And Huntsman Mental Health and the philanthropic side. But all of this, honestly, if we had a sieve here and we shook this down, it comes down to whether or not your city is working alone or your city is leveraging all the partners who have the money and the systems that we need to solve what is a statewide crisis that's playing out in our city. We have to have these partners. We have to stay at the table with them. And Andrew Johnson is doing a fantastic job day in and day out in building that. And if you want more details on what that system change looks like, please stick around. And I'm sorry, Andrew, but he'll stay also.
I'm actually going to ask you a question. At one meeting, Erin with posters to read his numbers at some meeting. And what do you think? Sure. Okay.
Posters. Okay.
I think that's all the questions we have from the room. Does anyone have any last moment? You just want to quick question.
Hi, Michelle.
Hi. Just based on your explanation about the universities and having Walmart to be such a majority of it, but based on the fact that they are not willing to provide their own personal security, I think as you move forward, would you be willing to consider the same things when building a resource center to make sure that that all of the potential is mitigated as much as possible? Or when you're, I don't know what the exact terminology is for what you're doing, you're placing resource centers around. But I think that's the gap that we really missed on these resource centers, was providing the appropriate security for both people inside and outside. Is that something that you?
Yeah, thanks, Michelle. You know, the ordinance that's with the council around future homeless resource center locations gives and requires much more accounting for what the impacts are that we know very well, because we hadn't run this type of a program with the road home for all those years. Now we know, and we know how it plays out in the community. And with this ordinance, which by the way, expands where homeless resource centers can happen in the city. Prior to this ordinance, it's not passed yet. They were limited to just a couple of zones in the city. This opens it up to more zones in the city and a better opportunity, I think, for geographic equity and not concentrating. But it also gives this council the opportunity to require that mitigation and the data accounting and proof of it be present in these future resource centers. There was something else I wanted to say. It's escaped me, I'm sorry, but yes.
I'll just add that with the new HRC ordinance that we will be theoretically we'll be voting on Tuesday, not tomorrow, but the following Tuesday. That if passed, it would make any new homeless resource center have to be approved by the city council, essentially. And for me, that's not about creating more barriers to creating more shelter, because we know, we've discussed this in this meeting, that we don't have enough beds right now. But it's making sure that when that is cited, that the policy body and the funding body is aware of where it's going, and before it gets built can put in some of those things that we weren't able to do the first round, like making sure things that are maybe outside of the development itself, which is previously it just stopped at the planning commission, but things like street lighting and things like fixing curb and gutter and making sure that there's like a safe way to get to tracks and all of those other things that are necessary that are outside of the boundary of the actual homeless resource center. Since the city council will be reviewing every single location, we'll be able to make those funding allocations and those policy decisions at the same time. That's my hope.
I remembered I was going to say that for those individuals who end up getting banned from the resource centers because of repeat behavior, that the low barrier shelter that Wayne Niederhauser is working on, so critical. A low barrier place that accepts more complicated case individuals with more complicated needs. And in addition, I think that mental and behavioral health component with the Huntsman Receiving Center and then liaising those folks into the permanent supportive housing that's being created anew right now. Those outlets that don't exist today for a place for people to go and be treated and have the services they need. Like, yeah, yes, we need the mitigation and enough security inside and outside of facilities, but we really need places that accept people and help them. Yeah, how about we go till 45? That's 2 minutes.
This is a really quick question. I'm just covering from Habitat for Humanity here in the Salt Lake City area, and Salt Lake County. My question is, there's probably not a quick answer for 2 minutes, but as we've talked a great deal about homelessness and we've talked about affordable housing, assuming that we're referring to rental units, like family units. There's also this whole continuum of housing where there's affordable home ownership, and that's the next step. And so I was wondering if you could take just a minute on what availability there might be for affordable home ownership in this area as we build out the ballpark area and start to encourage and hopefully facilitate new homeowners to come into the area and start building their families.
That's a really excellent question. Homeownership in our country has been one of the ways to exit poverty, one of the ways to build generational wealth, and it's not available to everybody. There are some legal challenges that we can get into about why developers choose to make apartments more than condos and things like that. But a couple things that we're trying to do on the city level is invest in there's 2 tools that I think will really help with this: community land trust and perpetual housing fund, which is community land trust is something where it's basically the city or a private entity or nonprofit or something like that will invest in the land, and then the improvements on the land are owned by that homeowner. So then when it goes to get sold again, they do have the appreciation, but that unit will forever be sold at slightly below market rate. So it provides a home ownership opportunity, but it also provides, but at a lower rate than the market rate, which is currently unaffordable to most people. The second tool is what we've called the perpetual housing fund. That's a shared equity model. So you're technically a renter, but rather than the profits and the appreciation in that development going to the developer or the property owner, it will allow the tenant to share in some of that equity, so they can, when that building is refinanced at year 10 or whatever the case may be, that profit actually gets shared to the tenants. So that's actually an even lower barrier. Technically they're tenants, right? But they are part of this equity pool where, so it allows a form of shared equity for people that maybe couldn't even qualify for a community land trust ownership opportunity. So we are working on those. There's $10 million that the mayor has proposed for us to go into that perpetual housing. the shared equity model, and that's something that we're trying to move very quickly on and help with homeownership, because we know the private market is not producing affordable homeownership.
I'm going to add that on the 10 million for the perpetual housing fund, which this has never been done in Utah before, but we're seeing it in some other parts of the country. It would actually create 1,000 units that are rental. And our ambition is that the majority of those be family sized. So more than 2 bedrooms in a unit. And that would be rental. The profit from the building itself, after all expenses are paid, would be redistributed as a rent subsidy every year instead of plowing it into the next project as typical nonprofit housing corporations do. But it would also create 500 additional ownership units. This is multifamily. We're talking about condos. But yes, Councilmember Mano is right. 1,000 of those you'd be a tenant. 500 more, so 1,500 units will be created with the 10 million, and those 500 would be for ownership. So you could even take your equity as a tenant in one of the 1,000 if you stay in long enough and put that cash equity into your new owned unit. And we're working with Chris Parker, who's done Give Group Development, a lot of creative housing in the city on this project. Thank you for coming out and caring about your community. We appreciate you sitting through all of these questions tonight, and we'll stick around for a bit.
Thank you all. Yes. I'd like to remind everybody that the street on the site. And
see you. Hard work.
I hope so. I hope so. I am part of it. Thanks for coming. Did we shut the meeting?
It's not a card.
Holding it down. Yeah, it's not different. Thank you. You're a great honor.
You have a card.
Sorry, then?
You have a business card?
I do. Yeah. But I could also just email you. I have 2 of your email addresses.
Okay.
Would you like me to get in touch?
Yeah, that's
Are you in Ballpark?
Is that?
Are you in Ballpark?
I'm not.
Where are you at?
I live on Capitol Hill.
Oh, you are?
I'm part of the